Next up, we have our second Diamond keynote. This is Marc Halbfinger. You all know him. He is the CEO of Console Connect and PCCW Global. He promises me that his keynote, which is entitled The Next Stage for ICT Interoperability, is going to be provocative. So you hold him to that, all right? Thank you very much. Come on out, Marc.
I'll try my best to be provocative but fast, right? People blame me that I speak quickly, so first let me tell you we're here to talk about the next stage for ICT interoperability, which in my view underneath it all is NAS, and that's why we're here. But before, I don't think that anybody actually sits back and says thank you to the four people at the top, to Nan, to Kevin, to Pascal and Stan, and of course Lori, who everyone says thank you to Lori. But to them, I think a round of applause for what they've created here. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And to the Console Connect and PCCW Global teams underneath, Frederick, my co-CEO at PCCW Global, Devesh, Dave Hughes, Lisa Carino, Paul Gamp, our CTO, who you'll hear tomorrow. Devesh, you heard yesterday. Lauren Slim and Shahar, who's not here. All of these people have been significant contributors over the years to MEF, and I would be remiss if I wouldn't say thank you to them and to the rest of the team that's here. I would point out that we view MEF very, very strongly. We always bring a large contingent here. This year we have 6 of our senior management team in the room today in order to try and take a retrospective together and make sure that we're there. And in order to do that, we've been honored to present here so many times. But I've actually been on stage 3 times. Once Nan interviewed me, and twice I made presentations, in 2014 and 2019. In 2014, I put forward a few concepts that was put together by the team that as critical applications that then were starting to move into the cloud, new challenges were emerging that we need to take up. And we were focused then on all of the complications of what the solutions would be required around federation of cloud and all sorts of ideas, things that haven't left us in the last 9 years as we've tried to focus. We spent time dealing with the different elements, that little piece in the middle, the swivel chair of the relationship between BSS and OSS, and how complex manual processes were, the requirement to get to federations of various forms, and to make sure that we were leading the road ultimately to get to a status of e-bonding, if you will, which serves as the basis for some of the discussions I'm going to put forward at the end. We've been pushing this. This is all from our 2014 presentation ever since. The concept of federation, of the industry working together across all of its functionalities. Then in 2019, a little bit after we had acquired Console Connect, or as I prefer to say publicly because it is quite true, when Console Connect acquired us from a mentality perspective, we explained that we were developing this digital software-defined fabric that would enable customers to focus on how to order services on an automated, on-demand basis. And that means making sure that we could deliver services to end users and hopefully also to the ICT food chain that envelops it on an on-demand basis. On-demand means, as Andrew was explaining what Lumen is doing with Internet on Demand, which is something that we also do among a variety of other things, that if you're able to break down the pricing components and drive through the BSS and OSS capability, effectively exposing the back end to the front end, we would be there. And we've been doing this since, well, when Console Connect has been doing this since 2014, 2015, but they integrated with the PCCW Global backbone in 2019, and since then we've been able to try and drive this approach to deliver a strong underlying network with platform capabilities that is a network with a fabric and a fabric with a network. Once we were able to integrate the technology stack, software coding, digital platform together with the physical networks that you see at the bottom, the physical assets with the software assets, we're able to get to what you see on the left. The beginning precepts of digital automated innovation, which is really the key. The opportunity, as we saw then and we still see it today, is to make sure that we could move from this linear manual processes approach to assure that we could get to a nonlinear growth in the ICT ecosystem. The arguable difference between us and some others is that we see so in doing it together with everyone else. We're too small to do it on our own, but we have tool sets and capabilities, and we are eager to find the way to collaborate with one another. This was the slide that I put up in 2019, which Nan had asked me to say, how are you going to challenge the industry? And we said we had been working from NNI to SDN, and we were at API, and arguably still there at the API stage. We said we need to move forward to a common modeling approach that would lead us to an environment of commercial settlement, from technical to commercial in the standardization process, to create the framework for that commercial capability. And we're still there from our point of view. What did we do internally as a result, going back from that approach? We decided to organize ourselves under a scaled agile framework. We promoted an environment that would facilitate our network engineers and software engineers to work together, to make sure that software and network is being decided upon in a structured manner, leveraging that scaled agile framework. And we created go-to-market streams that would allow us, value streams, that would allow us to evolve our business from the traditional linear environment that you had seen previously on the last slide on the left, to an environment of automation that gets us to a NAS environment that's being described here today, which is effectively to meet and to apply. And how do we get there? Last year, just before the AI story really hit the press aggressively from a user interface and consumer point of view, the Global Leaders Forum put out a proposal which is actually quoted in the MEF Status of the Industry report that Stan put out just ahead of this industry event. And that report focused on all of the elements that were driving mass 5G adoption, cloud as standard, Web 3.0, metaverse, and so on. And I've chosen to add in there the next bullet point, which is what's coming next and is already here, which is AI and quantum. How are we going to be able to manage with all that? If we stay with our historical linear approaches without working aggressively to make sure that our environments are combining network engineers with software engineers and understanding that physical network connectivity does not live alone and must find the methodologies to integrate with other elements of the ICT ecosystem, we're dead in the water. And so the GLF put out this environment, which I think is quite meaningful. It's certainly meaningful to us, and I'll show you in a moment why. A little bit of a commercial, and I apologize for the brag. But they put forward these 7 requirements and 4 additional capabilities that anyone in the service provider environment, and here I think they were careful to say not just network, but anyone that is involved in providing an ICT service provider needs to be looking at these components. And you can find this slide, by the way, in the MEF Status of the Industry. I think that's the title of the report, which Stan was alluding to yesterday. And what does it say? Here are those 11 requirements that are necessary to deliver, but when we look at it and we say, where does the industry need to collaborate? Well, frankly, on almost all of them. And you can see where they are. From a Console Connect perspective, in terms of what we've done, we've actually already deployed all of these 11 capabilities. They exist today. And we invite every one of you to take a look at them, and I'll explain how in just a moment. But even though we're involved, we recognize fully that a bundle of these require further industry collaboration. And we're happy to go up, down, left, right in order to find the roadmap in order to create that collaboration. So where do we stand now with regard to our NAS platform? Well, we started with that global backbone that you see there. There's a large transmission infrastructure that sits underneath that layer 2, 3 that we show you there. And on the right-hand side, a view of sort of a semi-cloud of various services that we provide. And what's critical for us is the way we organized our environment. We have our in-house development teams making sure that we're driving innovation with open APIs. Who are those open APIs available to? They're available to any of you. They're available to anyone that are in the ICT industry, whether enterprise or service provider, data center, anyone that you see along the right-hand column there, developers certainly, anyone that's driving SaaS applications or network service provider components. The key from our point of view is to facilitate this meeting place capability, to make sure that any end user or any other partner to the delivery of an ICT capability is willing to work with us, so that the open API system abstracts complexity and rate of change in cloud and makes sure that any API endpoint can be delivered through this open environment. And here we encourage you to go online to take a look at APIs in Console Connect. You can Google it and you'll find it. Very easy to work with, and there's a bundle of folks here that would be happy to help you through it as well. A couple of use cases that we've done very simply. And all of this delivered on demand. The only manual activity that needs to take place in this particular instance is that on the left-hand side, an enterprise is connected to a data center port location, so we have to provision that port. but the ordering of that port takes place on an automated basis, and the moment that port is provisioned, everything else that you see takes place on an on-demand basis. This one's very exciting because, quite frankly, without me getting into the specifics, the enterprise user here, based in let's call it Southeast Asia particularly, was able to leverage this capability in order to save a massive amount of money on cloud egress costs. And I don't think it's something that we pay enough attention to, which is to understand that while I address the issues that Andrew was raising in the previous discussion, actually, if we work together and develop relationships, we can make cost efficiencies available to our users without even considering. And those cost efficiencies can come for a network operator at a time when they can actually grow margin instead of competing unnecessarily. A second approach here, which I think is quite critical, because one of the issues that I've always been pushing on MEF when I've had private chats, particularly with Nan and with Pascal, is about the need to include also the mobility environment in our thought processes. It's not good enough, in my view, that just vendors and networks be here, although huge applause to MEF for aggregating different interests into this environment. We have in the middle a Console Connect cloud router. That cloud router, which is an instance that allows you to manage all of your cloud loads or any type of infrastructure, allows you to move capacities or any type of payload from one cloud to another, from one endpoint to another. That can be an office or it can be a device, and in this instance, a secure device that would be articulated through an automatically managed SIM card at the end, available today on an on-demand basis. This is perhaps the most complete environment that you can possibly imagine to go from endpoint to cloud to network to other location. Devesh raised it yesterday, and I apologize for repeating his comment, but I thought it was quite important. Underneath all of this is the API gateway environment that we see. We importantly understand that while Console Connect is tightly integrated with various forms of APIs, and our APIs are open to each and every one of you, if you wish, and we invite developer communities to use them, we also want to go much further. And we wish to align further with MEF and the API roadmap, as well as TM Forum and the GSMA. We believe that this is all quite important. The common services approach that we have, as well as an approach to settlement and partner relationships and integration, all of these are critical to our roadmap in the future. But there's more to it. If we want to go to the next stage, we have to build on what MEF has done today with the LSO framework, which has helped facilitate this end-to-end orchestration through a structure that makes sense. Everything that we heard this morning from Pascal and from Nan doesn't work. If you can't hear me, come to me afterwards and I'll tell you what I said. We've embraced all of this along the way, and we think it's quite critical. And we also understand that these elements here that you see in the life cycle, the business and operational life cycle that has been defined there, is absolutely quite critical to create a standardized approach to what's going on. And yet, we have to do a reality check, because every service provider has a structure where they have this one little operator, but then they have to interact with buyers and they need to interact with sellers, and this whole construct becomes complicated. And by the way, the buyers and the sellers are not always like-minded. If you can find a cloud that thinks like a network operator, that thinks like a mobile operator, that thinks like a SaaS provider, come and tell me, I'd like to meet them, because it doesn't exist. And so how do we go to this, from this complex mesh to where we need to be? The challenge is that each operator is functioning in their own environment. They have systems designed one at a time. From my 2014 slide all the way back to where we are today in 2023, we're still carrying all of this crap, a lot of us, and we need to figure out a way in order to modify it going forward. I apologize to the guys that built the original stuff. Each operator is using their own proprietary data model, and even though MEF and TM Forum and GSMA are going to try and get everyone to get standardized, the truth of the matter is it's going to be complicated to do that. And so we come back to what we had promoted in 2019. What is the approach to go from APIs to common modeling and to get to also a common approach to settlement all the way downstream and upstream through the food chains of the relationships? The blueprint that Nan put up today that was being described, which I had a chance to take a look at quickly, is really, I think, fantastic in its approach. And yet it needs to consider the downstream complexity, because I am doubtful that everyone is going to embrace fully standardization in an immediate moment. That will be difficult to achieve. So how do we move forward so quickly when others in our ICT industry adjacencies are doing so independently without considering standards? How do we find that roadmap to get to an environment of at least common modeling of some sort? We tried our luck. We started to develop this approach, and we won awards last year, very exciting, where we did a data on demand use case where we focused on the key 3 elements that are described in Pascal's presentation with regard to what has to happen at the blockchain level. Number 1, inventory. Number 2, identity. And number 3, settlement. We focused on inventory and identity in a production case. This is not a test. We are actually doing this right now. By the way, this was originally driven, a lot of credit to Vodafone's finance teams. In putting this together, PCCW Global Console Connect, together with Colt, Deutsche Telekom, and Vodafone, data on demand. This is not voice. This is just circuits. How would we be able to create an environment where we're able to identify common inventories, to reach into each other's catalogs, and to make sure that all this is done? Very successful, in my view, in understanding where everything was, but we also had a lot of learnings associated with it. We used ClearX, excellent vendor, but by and large, the relationship with them, by definition, would have to be proprietary in nature. That is interesting if it can be scalable and meaningful from a cost point of view. But is that where the industry wants to go, into proprietary environments or not? I'll leave that question hanging, and I won't answer. A road forward, then, is a little bit of a differentiated approach. If we take the learnings that we had in that production case that I showed you in the previous slide, our view at Console Connect is to move forward with a DAO, a distributed automated organization. We would set a common set of rules that would be guided also by the standards that would be put forward by MEF and other industry bodies in order to take us to an environment that had business rules, conditions, processes, captured via the smart contracts that were described yesterday and today, that would sit on top of a distributed ledger infrastructure, but not necessarily a unique one. This would allow an environment for multiple chains, multiple infrastructures to interact with one another. Those digital information flows, perhaps fed by the MEF Identity Management Service, perhaps, would also facilitate where we want to go, where we would want to go, at least in the area of tokenomics that would facilitate. To facilitate the automated ICT interoperability that was described previously by Pascal and so on, we also want to leverage these APIs for the buyer and seller in order to get to this element on the bottom right-hand corner that was described. Exactly. Inventory, identity, and settlement would then be the key. There is a reference architecture that's been evolved by ETSI, the European Technical Standards Institute, which I urge you to take a look at online, which we believe can provide the base element for how those tokenomics and rule bases can be developed, but it doesn't have to be exclusively that. We believe that the approach to a DAO can facilitate extendable architectures and incorporate some of the standardization and rule bases that would come from the multiple environments. The DAO would facilitate fraud detection and mitigation as a simple use case. Data on demand, as we saw in the use case that we had, but with modifications that would help us steer away from some of the proprietary structures. Certainly mobile roaming settlement, perhaps now without the clearinghouse interface, because we'd be able to create multilateral relationships. Security, service level agreements, IoT, and many more, and we believe that this DAO would facilitate interoperable distributed ledger chains, and I think that that's really quite critical. So where do we go from here, from my point of view? Number 1, we invite you to come and write to Console Connect APIs, and to do so in harmony with the API structures that have been put forward by MEF and by others, and to take a look where we may have developed activities which are perhaps a little bit further down the road of that evolutionary thought process, and we hope that we'll be able to continue to contribute. On the DAO side, I've just said we envision this approach, and we invite, therefore, everyone to call for increased collaboration, not just around standardization, but around specific interoperability that would facilitate the next generation approach for inventory, identity, and settlement in network as a service that comes with automation and on demand. Because on demand, in an automated environment where the software code is tightly linked with the network facility and the APIs are open, you're going to have extremely quick movement in the industry in order to facilitate what end users require, wherever they may be in the supply chain. Ergo, we need to find this road, this common modeling approach that would facilitate ultimately automated settlement and delivery of value in the backstream, because if you're otherwise going to be trying to sort through that, you're going to be in some difficulty. So we call for that collaboration. I'm happy to announce that the person that pushed forward the DAO in our concept within some different service providers, Daniele Mancuso from Telecom Italia Sparkle, who's also on the board of MEF, together with my colleague Frederick Chui, who's here, Daniele, Mirko Voltolini from Colt, myself, Paul Gamp, Kerry Gilder, and Elisabetta Romano from Colt and Telecom Italia Sparkle, respectively. We agreed earlier this morning to move ahead conceptually in creating this DAO, and we invite anyone in the ICT industry to join us, and we'll publish more as we go forward within the next couple of months. So I hope that was meaningful to all of you, and thank you very much. Apologies if I went over by a minute or two because of the microphones. Thanks very much.